Hey there, so welcome back, and in this lesson we are going to look at data platform or Azure data services, or mainly target for Azure data engineers or Azure DBAs or database administrators. So this is mainly targeted for certification DP200 or Azure Data Engineer DP200 or DP900. So let's first begin with the different data types. Now there are three main categories of data type. You have a structured data, which is also called as a relational data or SQL data store, which is a structured query language where you have rows and columns, and data is stored in tables in form of rows and columns. Then you have semi-structured data where you have, I'll cover that semi-structured data example, but you have some structured but not exactly like tables and table in a rows and columns. That structure might be JSON file, that structure might be a XML file, that structure might be a YAML file or a sensor data which is a little bit semi-structured basically. That's, and then you have a unstructured data which could be your images, GIFs, files, video, audio, and so on. So that's unstructured data. So here are some examples of structured, unstructured, and semi-structured. So structured data is what you see in left-hand side, which is your rows and columns stored in a table. Then your unstructured data is example is your text data, a Word document, PDF, notepad, video, audio, image, and so on. And then semi-structured is your XML format, which has some schema, but you define what schema. It could be a Java script object notation, JSON or XML or YAML or sensor data, whatever data in a format that you define. Now, depending on these data type, you have different data stores. So for structured data, Azure has Azure SQL, and those Azure SQL database comes in two flavors. One you see left hand side is an infrastructure as a service where you create a virtual machine and install SQL database on top of that, the way you do it in your on-premise or customer data center. Then you have two flavors of SQL database. One is Azure SQL Managed Instance and then Azure SQL Database. Again, if you're part of our DP 200, 201, which is now DP 203, we're going to discuss in detail about it. So this is a SQL Server option, which I said you have a SQL Server in a virtual machine, you have a SQL Managed Instance, and you also have the SQL Database Server, or which is your SQL database here, which is comes in single or elastic pool. Again, this is to give you high level. If you're part of, as I said, in our Azure Data Engineer, we'll be going deep into this database service. So that's for your structured data. Then you have semi-structured data where you have a Cosmos DB, which is a globally distributed multi-model database service, which gives you an option to access it over the normal SQL or MongoDB or Cassandra or Azure Tables or Graph. You have all these options available with this Cosmos DB. Then you have a table store. We also saw this when we were looking at in a storage account. So you have a storage account in which you are saying, for example, table storage, you have a table of customer and that will have some value key value pair. And then similarly, you have multiple tables with a key value pair. So it's a NoSQL database, ideal for storing structured or non-relational databases data on for table. Then you have a Azure Data Factory, which is a ETL, extract, transform, and load. So you have some data that you need to basically load into different system. It can be used for that purpose. So you have, for example, a CSV which is stored in your blob object, which is a storage account, and then you have to push it into the SQL Server. So you can use Data Factory, or you have a data in on-premise, which is customer data center, and you have to store them into SQL database or maybe some other database. So the Data Factory is mainly for ETL kind of a workload. You also have a Azure Data Lake, which is for unstructured data. You have a big data kind of a workload. So that you might have heard of a HDFS, Hadoop file system. So that kind of when you need a big, huge data lake or a huge amount of data, that is where data is coming from multiple sources. You put it into the store, which is called as Microsoft Azure Data Lake, which can then be accessed over different options like HD Insight, which is a analytics and reporting. You have a different type of analytics or Hortonwork or Cloudera and so on, where that can work with Azure Data Lake. So these are all the database options or data store options, which is you have storage account we saw in the storage. You have data lake, which is used for when you have a when you need a low cost, high throughput data store, which is for NoSQL data with unlimited storage for data lake. As your data break, this is for a Spark based cluster, which is enables fast processing of machine learning solutions. So if you're part of DP 100, we're going to look at Azure Databricks over there as well. Then you have Azure Cosmos DB, which is a globally distributed for structured and unstructured data store we saw earlier, which is like millisecond query response time. Azure SQL Database is a relational data store, which is mainly for used for transactional workload. You have Synapse, which is a data warehouse, which is again relational data, but for data warehouse and analytics workload. You have Azure Stream Analytics, which is an event processing engine. So where you have a lot of data coming and it's processing on as the data is coming. Azure Data Factory, as we said, will orchestrate the batch movement, the data from one system to another in batches. You have Azure HD Insight, which is a low cost, high throughput data store when you need to store a NoSQL type of data. Azure Data Catalog, which is mainly for documenting what kind of a data types you have. So documenting your data stores, Azure Data Catalog. So these are all the data store options that you have. And that's pretty much all about data or Azure data engineers or targeted for Azure data, anyone who's working on data. So data platform survey or data service on Microsoft Azure. Now, in the next lesson, we are going to look at Azure security. So I'll see you there.
Well, this was our Azure Cloud expert, Mr. Atul from Team K21Academy, and this clip was taken from our free course for Azure beginners. Even if you're a beginner, this course will give you a holistic overview of Azure Cloud, Azure DevOps, Azure Data, Azure Security, and whatnot. And if you're already working on Azure Cloud, then this course will help you to revise your basic concepts. In order to subscribe to this course, all you have to do is just go to k21academy.com/Azure and subscribe to this course. And within 50 minutes, you'll be getting an email. Under that, you'll be getting your login credentials and our WhatsApp group where you can ask your every doubt related to Azure Cloud. Thank you, and I will see you in the free course.